As luck would have it, this July brings us not only one, but two betas for new hero shooters, with Marvel Rivals multiplayer beta currently ongoing across PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, S, and PC. There's an element of deja vu going on here, obviously. We're hot off the heels of playing Sony's Concord in a brief weekend beta, a 5v5 hero shooter in its own right running on Unreal Engine 5. Today, in Marvel Rivals, it's almost needless to say that it too runs on UE5, but Rivals does go much further in utilizing the engine's features by way of integrating Lumen GI and reflections. Likewise, in upgrading the heroes to superheroes, all played from a third-person perspective rather than first, it attempts to more radically break the mold set by Overwatch. Famed comic book favourites, ranging from Spider-Man to the cast of Guardians of the Galaxy, from Iron Man to the Punisher, are all present. This blending of Marvel IP and team-based action is one that genuinely works, and impressions so far suggest a more ambitious, though as a side effect, more technically troubled game on all platforms in its current state. So, how does each console's frame rate hold up to the target 60 frames per second between PS5, Series X and S? Does it stick the landing, or are there still glaring issues to address beyond the beta? And how do the visuals compare, notably when put side by side against a fully maxed out PC with Lumen GI and Lumen Reflection set to Ultra? Let's find out. Coming from developer NetEase Games, the content of Marvel Rivals beta is in flux, but right now we have a generous 21 characters on offer and 4 map variants to play. The developer's history is curious too, given that the team has direct experience with Overwatch itself, having collaborated to bring many of Blizzard's games to the Chinese market. This direct experience clearly translates to Marvel Rivals. The menu design is undeniably similar, but it's snappy, slick, and beautifully laid out. The Heroes section is replete with every tidbit of information you could imagine on character lore and abilities, and in terms of the in-game action, it has its own unique ambitions. There are 2 key twists here. Firstly, the game deploys destructible environments, where it's possible to chip away parts of the map to reveal new lines of sight or even remove routes. Bridges break, chandeliers fall, and pillars and walls collapse. To see which parts are destructible, you simply hold right on the D-pad to raise an alternative X-ray view of the stage. All round, it's a well-worked mechanic that adds an extra chaotic dynamic to each map compared to rivaling hero shooters. Secondly, there's the superhero abilities of Marvel Rivals. As mentioned, this is a third-person hero shooter and configured for 6v6 matchups. The movesets for each hero, though, are, simply put, more extreme in scope than what we're used to. Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Storm all have a means to essentially fly through the stage, and in the case of Spider-Man's web-slinging, there's a frankly outrageous level of maneuverability that really demands quick streaming of level assets from the engine. The camera and controls arguably struggle to keep up with the motion, and it's better suited for exterior areas. Other characters, meanwhile, also have a unique gimmick that puts a relatively high level of GPU strain on consoles and PC. In this case, Doctor Strange is able to summon a portal to any place on the map, much in the same vein as Valve's 2 Portal games. For a brief spell, this allows teammates and enemies to fire through a portal to a separate area on the map, and even letting them cross through. Everything combined, the presence of map destruction physics, plus these more outlandish abilities, not only sets Marvel Rivals apart from its inspiration, but it also makes the game an inherently more technically demanding concept to pull off. Add in the support for Unreal Engine 5's Lumen for global illumination and reflections, which adds a software-based approximation of ray tracing, and this ends up being a much more ambitious effort than what we were expecting. To the comparisons first then, and let's see where PS5, Series X and S land. There's little to split the 2 premium machines this time, with each targeting a 1440p native resolution, with drops to 810p. Both PS5 and Series X also get the same Lumen GI setting between them, while each only uses screen space reflections, rather than the Lumen reflections possible on PC. However, as ever, It's the 4 teraflop Series S that distinguishes itself within the trio most for taking major cutbacks in visual features to hit the same 60 FPS target. To dial into the differences a little more easily, let's look at just the Xbox consoles for now. Firstly, Series S runs at a lesser 972p target resolution, dropping to 540p lowest. Secondly, there's a drop in texture quality across the board, whether it's the ink-line detailing across Hulk's torso or the materials across the maps themselves in close-up. We get a lower resolution asset in every case on Series S. It only gets worse from here though, because Series S also loses character shadows completely. Fortunately, environmental shadow maps are maintained and baked into each region, but you'll see how, underfoot in this side-by-side run, Series S loses dynamic shadows underneath the Scarlet Witch. Beyond this, some major high points of Marvel Rivals visuals are removed, with UE5's Lumen global illumination being axed. It's stripped out, and Series S instead reverts to the simpler screen space approach for shading. Compared to Series X, this means environmental lighting, especially around interiors, lacks the light bounce to brighten certain scenes, while in others there's a lack of shading in enclosed spaces. More surprisingly, even screen space reflections on the puddles and building sides are outright removed on Series S. Instead, we have very simple cube mapping to stand in for reflections, which essentially amounts to a simple texture planted on reflective elements with no reactivity to the scene itself. Overall, this is a highly disappointing result for Series S, in the beta at least. None of this is to call Series X or PS5 the absolute best take on Marvel Rivals though, but they acquit themselves well by comparison. PC though, of course, offers a wealth of great options that simply takes things to another level. Firstly, taking Series X in example again as a kind of console representative, we're not getting a match for PC's Ultra Lumen GI setting, or even the lower down high setting. We appear instead to have a bespoke Lumen GI setting just on console, and the result is this. It's a clear step up in shading depth next to the screen space GI method on PC. However, next to the high Lumen GI setting, Series X suffers from a lower accuracy approach that produces more flickering shadow artifacts. Note the wood flooring here on Series X in the middle, and the visual noise that goes with the shading produced by Lumen. In UE5's DevTools, this potentially relates to the final gather quality variable, or in other words, the resolution at which the final effect of the shading is resolved after calculating the light bounce. This might be improved come Marvel Rivals' final launch, but as it stands in the beta, it does fall short of the Lumen GI settings on PC. Next along, interestingly, we do not get Lumen reflections on any console, whether that's PS5 or Series X, and instead we're getting a pure screen space technique that matches PC's SSR setting. All the usual artifacts from SSR are present, including occlusion artifacts. Hence, once an object falls out of the screen's view, that detail also disappears in the reflection. Admittedly, on PC, the Lumen reflection setting isn't 100% dependent on a simulated ray-traced approach. Rather, Lumen only draws parts of the detailing for buildings and characters across the ground, and this is then combined with SSR to flesh out the details further. Looking up and down is a good way to test which is which, because when we have Lumen reflections set in the menus, we see how details like the metal gate ahead only fully renders in with SSR once we start to look up, rather than in the Lumen pass. It's a hybrid approach then, and this means PC doesn't entirely avoid the artifacts related to SSR, but it is overall more accurate than the pure SSR approach on console. Long story short, comparing Series S, Series X, and PC in a three-way split, there's a clear cascade in quality from left to right, leaving Series S very much behind in the best visual features Marvel Rivals has to offer. Switching over to performance testing, all three consoles are pretty easy to summarize. 60 FPS is well held 95% of the time, but that remaining 5% really sticks out for various reasons. Most egregiously, we have the hitching and stuttering that's possible while navigating the map. Not every game is affected, but quick travel only tends to exacerbate the issue. So, flying as Iron Man or web-slinging as Spider-Man are both surefire ways to trigger a sudden clump of dropped frames, and for a competitive game so dependent on a consistent 60fps lock, it's quite jarring to see. Bearing in mind this could be a server-side network issue, and this being the point of the beta, it's worth giving the benefit of the doubt for now, but ideally it will be fixed when the game releases. Also a concern are the more sustained drops during play. For example, Doctor Strange summoning a portal is an easy way to trigger a drop on any of the 3 current gen machines, causing lurches into the 50s with screen tearing to boot. All 3 machines are equally affected by summoning this portal, where at a push, Series S is marginally more prone to heavier drops overall. All of which is a shame, obviously, given Series S is already paying a heavy price in visual features to sustain 60fps in the first place. Marvel Rivals does need more work then to tighten up a perfect 60fps lock. Otherwise, it's a well-presented game on console with a majority of play hitting the mark. A word on PC performance too. Unfortunately, PC is no stranger to games with hitching issues in recent years, and Marvel Rivals is no different. It's likely a shader compilation issue in this case based on the evidence, and that's despite Rivals even offering a shader cache installation screen on booting up the game. Again, it's unfortunate and has the very same impact during play as on consoles, with these sharp spikes in frame times interrupting the game's flow. Also, to touch on performance more generally, maxing the game out at 4K resolution, ultra settings, with ultra Lumen GI and reflections does take a toll on this RTX 4080 machine with lurches to the mid-40s. To mitigate these drops, we have, as ever, a comprehensive suite of upscaling technologies, from AMD's FSR to Nvidia's DLSS and Intel's XeSS. Using the DLSS quality mode and rendering at 1440p native in this case puts me at a 60fps line with no GPU side drops. Though again, traversal hitching is still a problem that really blights the experience. Overall, for PC, there's no question that there's a generous suite of options here to scale the experience. The bigger problem to address though remains the hitching, and by release, I seriously hope we see steps to improve it. Speaking of Marvel Rivals release, it's curious to see no precise launch date announced as yet. The beta is on for an extended stretch at least, and this appears to be the focus for developer NetEase Games for now, as it fine-tunes its networking, competitive balance, and optimization on consoles and PC. It's a surprisingly ambitious take on the hero shooter though, more so in some ways than Concord, in the fact it supports Lumen and pushes hard on the destruction physics. Indeed, the team also appears to have done a decent job of translating iconic character moves into actual in-game mechanics, though it remains to be seen how tightly tuned it'll be for competitive play. After all, I've barely scratched the surface of what's likely to come in the end product, given that there's only 4 maps here. The prospects for PS5, Series X, S and PC are promising though, and really, if the team could just fix the performance issues, we could be on to a genuinely compelling Marvel spin on a blueprint laid out by Overwatch years ago. But that's all from me today. If you did find this video useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.